Welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinscoe. I'm an advisor, author, and general explorer of the service and experience space. My guests tend to have just released some interesting research. They run a company that has some interesting tech in the service and experience space. They are part of an organization that is doing some cool stuff, or they run their own business doing interesting things for both their customers and or their employees. That's enough from me. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Jamie Smith. Now, Jamie is a fellow Scot, so it's always nice to have a fellow Scot on the on the podcast, and you'll hear from him shortly. But let me tell you a little bit about Jamie. So Jamie is, I've known Jamie vaguely for a number of years, but he's in this customer future space, and he's writing a newsletter and also can develop in a business. But he's also been working on some really cool stuff in the background, and I think he might have just given birth to something else, a new thing. Anyway, he'll tell us about that in a minute. It's very interesting, very cool. Jamie, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm really well. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Now, so we didn't actually meet. Well, we've met. I think we might have passed each other in a corridor sort of thing, kind of like a number of years ago, because we've been in similar orbits. Because I remember going to this Control Shift kind of organized summit at King's Place, I think it might have been, in London about 10 years ago. And I ended up, associated with that, I ended up speaking to Geraldine McBride from MyWave around some of the PIE sort of personal information economy type of stuff that she was doing. That was back in 2014 in October, which is crazy. Anyway, stopping rambling. So I know we've been in and around this stuff, but I wanted to kind of ask you just kind of to fill me in. Am I right in my recollections? And two, what have you been up to kind of like since then? And what are you kind of focusing on right now, Jamie?
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for having me. What an introduction. Let's go back to that 2014 time. I've spent the last 10 years answering the question, what happens when you give data back to people? Mm-hmm. Data's kind of elsewhere at the moment. It sits in organizations who look after it on our behalf, and they make sense of it. But the GDPR, which was first drafted in 2011, made it live in 2018, said, well, I should have a copy of that. And that's fine. That's a kind of regulatory, slightly boring perspective. Mm-hmm. But I've been answering the question, well, okay, what happens then? So I've got a copy of my data. So what?
Yeah.
What are the value propositions? Like, why will customers care? Do they care? Mostly not. I don't care about identity or data and, data lakes and AI and stuff. I care about what I can do with it. Mm-hmm. And so, well, why would businesses do that? And actually, if it's about switching, they probably don't want me to do that. So there's a really interesting conversation to be had about, well, how do I get my data and why would I do it? Is this about loyalty? Is it about switching between services? Is it about actually being able to get insights myself? This idea of personal finance management, PFM, has been around for more than 10 years.
Sure.
And it's kind of interesting, but the basic version of that shows me a pie chart of my spend. And I'm like, all right, so much. What do I do with that?
You're like, nice.
Precisely. So to answer your question, really the last 10 years have been, okay, well, what happens when I've got my data? What can I do with it? Why would I care? Mm-hmm. But let's go deeper. Like, well, how do I know it's me asking for the data? How much does digital trust play a part of that?
Right.
So I spent 2014 to roughly 2018 helping businesses make sense of that as a consultant at Control Shift. And then I joined what's been a whirlwind of a journey by joining a company called Evernym, EVERNYM. And they launched a digital wallet and said, okay, well, look, blockchain's interesting, DLT, crypto actually means cryptography. And if you apply some of that to personal data, you can start to do some clever things and say, well, what if I hold my data on my phone? Mm-hmm. And so I've been working on the why for the first 5 years of kind of what's the business models and what's the value propositions and why will businesses care? I'm working with banks and retailers and governments and telcos, loyalty companies to make sense of it. well, now we've got the tooling. Now we've got the digital tools that can help me.
Right.
So I can prove it's me. I can make it portable. I can store it myself. And so this isn't about Bitcoin maximalizing it, or being a Web3 maxi. It's about saying, well, what if we decentralize the data and give it back to people?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's brought me up to date. Evanim ended up being bought by Norton, the antivirus company, and they're working on some really exciting digital wallet technologies.
I'm sure Norton would say, we're not just antivirus. We do all that sort of stuff.
Of course, they do all sorts of exciting stuff. But I left them at the end of last year, and I'm now working on a new services business called Mission to help businesses make sense of this new world where data is now more fluid and more portable and trusted. And just to finish the point, I actually think if you think about, well, what do I do with the data? It's about empowerment. It's about meaning I can share selected bits of my data where I want on my terms. And that creates a whole new customer experiences. It enables whole new ways of thinking about loyalty. It does enable switching, yes, but it also means I can get insights myself and start to think about, well, what do I want and how should I think about choices I'm making and recommendations. Sure. So this new services company is going to help businesses go on that journey. And the grand title I'm giving it is Empowerment Tech.
I mean, brilliant. Thank you for that. That's great. I think because what you were talking about there, and also what I saw in a recent newsletter, and you talked about this need for the customer tech, and I'll get you to explain the difference between customer tech and empowerment tech, or whether they're the same sort of thing in a minute. But it reminded me of something that Professor John Seddon said to me when I had him on the podcast. I love that guy because he's this kind of lone voice in the kind of the wilderness, talking about we should think about systems thinking and how that what might help us. And he said something to me on the podcast, and he said, the problem is that, and I paraphrase, it says that we often take a customer typology of demand and then try and fit it into how we want to do business. So it's like it is that sort of square peg into a round hole type of thing. And that just made me think about that, the whole customer tech and having hold of the data and switching and being able to go, and for me or us to be able to almost define and change and, if you like, sculpt the relationships that we want to have with kind of like different people based on the kind of what we want to share with them. And so tell me how if that's right, and tell me about the kind of the bit more about the need for the customer tech tools, and are they the same as empowerment tech?
Great questions. That point he made about trying to force fit customers, into products is the kind of root issue here, right? I think we don't have tools ourselves.
Yeah.
As we do have no way of handling the data or managing things. If I want to find out a warranty date or my account number, I Google myself. I literally go to Gmail and I use search to find all my emails to find my warranty numbers and that kind of thing, which is mad. So that's the best I've got. Maybe I've got a spreadsheet, but that's really for nerds who think about things like conditional formatting.
Well, talk about nerdy stuff. I think then it just made me think about, if you really want to go nerdy on this, I guess you probably want to look up doc searls and VRM and all that type of stuff. Now, we'll put that to one.
Well, we're going to come to it. And
right.
Interestingly, my path to this journey involved Doc back in about 2009, 2010.
Right.
And actually, he talks about intent casting and vendor relationship management, not customer relationship management. And we'll get to that in a minute. And that's actually will be one of the outcomes from this empowerment tech. But the point is that people, customers, citizens, patients, we don't have our own digital tools. We gave all digital tools to businesses. So they have CRM and predictive analytics and clever AI now. And they can predict who's going to churn most, and they can calculate average revenue per user instantly and think about who to optimize and cross-sell. I don't have any of that. I've got a book with passwords in it. And so
he doesn't really.
One of the, it's actually the safest way to do it. Anyway, exactly. One of the outcomes of that is businesses there's no way to handshake with a customer.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why, if you think about customer engagement, I can be sent a message, I can be sent an email, and both of them are push and kind of interruptive.
And a lot of the time are no reply.
Right, exactly. And that's hoping they've got the right email and the right phone. Or you can pull. You can get me to come to your website, or get me to download an app, both of which are pull, and both of which I've got to create an account and do the password reset because I come in once a year, and it's clumsy. And I've got to fill out forms on my phone. Like, we don't have digital tools on the customer side.
Yeah.
And this is a long way of me saying it's no wonder businesses are, I like to think of it saying that they're designed inside out. Like they think about themselves and their products, and they don't think about the customer because there's no way for the customer to show up other than an email address or a phone or a form fill.
Yeah.
And one of the frustrating things that happens is because businesses, it's like, it's a bit high level, Copernicus, right?
Right.
500 years ago, we used to think the Earth was the middle of the world, the middle of the universe, and everything went around us, including the sun. And he said, "Nah, I've measured it, and I think actually the sun's in the middle, and we go around it." And it changed everything. It changed our concepts of our importance, but also how we think about physics and how the world works. The same thing's about to happen. Businesses think they're in the middle, and all the customers orbit it, orbit them. And so their products, their services, their customer journeys. The customer journey is, I need a mortgage to I have a mortgage. That's the customer journey. But we're about to completely invert it. And I say, well, no, the customer's in the middle, and all these businesses are orbiting us. Because guess what? When I go to get a mortgage, I speak to 4 different providers and 4 different price comparison sites. And I speak to a broker and my mates. So I'm in the middle of that journey. And the customer journey really is, my wife's pregnant, I think I might need a bigger house, to I'm sitting on garden furniture drinking champagne on day one and the broadband doesn't work.
Right.
That's the customer journey. And the real, now we're into Punks, yes, right? We're into the real customer journey. And if you map it and understand it from a customer's point of view, you see all sorts of new problems, repetition, problems to solve. Password management, data management. Why on earth am I repeating the same information over and over again, let alone on paper?
Sure.
So you could spot new business opportunities. You could spot new ways to reuse digital identity, not just have a digital identity. You could reimagine the customer experience. Sometimes the best customer experience is we know customer experience. Right? So,
no, indeed. I mean, there's the old saying was that best service is no service at all.
Right. So that's not, I'll come to that in a minute. But this complete inversion is a long-winded answer of me saying we're designing businesses inside out because they have no way of handshaking with customers. Once I can have my kind of digital endpoint that's not an email address or phone number or an app, that's a digital service that exists with and for me, then I can wrap all sorts of interesting companies, products, services, experience around me. And that's going to be better for business.
Yeah.
It's going to build more trust. It's going to be more efficient because it's going to be correct data, all that stuff. So I think it's exactly right. The businesses, we're trying to shove customers into kind of wrong size product holes. One size fits most, and not think about customers. And we've been saying we're customer centric and user centric for years, decades. It's just we never were because we didn't have tools. And I'm saying that empowerment tech means now we can have tools where the commercial model is about helping me, and I can stitch together new experiences, and that's going to be better for business. That's the point, and that's what this new services company is going to be helping
right.
businesses.
And is that when you talk about those new services, is that going to be helping people sort of understand how it changes their proposition and how they kind of work and how they kind of go to market, but also kind of like what sort of like tools are out there that they can combine together? I mean, and does that then, because there's another thing, a term that you use, because it's like, I was making notes, reading the newsletter, like customer tech, ? Empowerment tech, ? Customer stack, what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
So is that the kind of, you're helping people understand what are the implications for the technology stack? And I guess in my head, because I think in sometimes pictures, it's almost a bit like I have a sci-fi movie watching kind of spaceships kind of like couple together, like a docking station of sorts. It's like and there's like all sorts of gases given off. But it feels like is that kind of, you're going to help them trying to understand that and what that kind of looks, what's that looks like, because actually kind of if I leap on from there, and what basically what you were saying is like going, a lot of this really gets into the whole personalization and privacy sort of like space, particularly when I think about personalization has always been, forgive me for all the marketers out there, fancy guesswork in many ways. You take all this kind of all this data and you go like, we're kind of fine. We'll put them into these different boxes and we'll think about trying to match them all these different things and then push it out and then fingers crossed, hope for the best. And that gets a bit more sophisticated when you add more kind of like data. And then if you actually start to listen to what's kind of going on around the place, you add the first party data, you get closer into to actually behavior. But actually the big leap is when you get zero party data, but that requires the customer to do something. Or weirdly, crazy idea, you actually have to talk to them and ask them, here's what we'd like to do. Can you give us some stuff in order to do that? But it feels like taking that behavioral requirement away from, is almost like giving that power to customers to go, you are the zero party. Kind of, why don't you then you can define what personalization and privacy looks like for you. I mean, am I right?
Yes. The short answer is yes. And the reason it's yes, and I would say this, wouldn't I? I think the point about, I'm going to come to the personalization thing in a second. You talked about, we're trying to create new language here because it doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, sure.
Just like CRM wasn't a thing in 1980s, and Tom Siebel came along in 1990s and said, no, we need, to manage 1 million records at once. Oh, that's crazy. Well, because it was on Rolodexes till that point. Well, we got CRM. It was an automated system that could manage those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Let's call them kind of new digital tools are going to arrive on the customer side, but they're going to have lots of different flavors and types, and going to be use different technologies. And so that's what I meant by the customer stack.
Right.
Meaning there's storage of stuff.
Right.
There's, cryptographically signing of stuff so I can prove it came from me.
Right.
Watermarks. There's going to be AI that sits on my side, so it's going to be personal AI.
Right.
It's going to be trained on my data.
Right.
There's going to be digital signing. So, not just a DocuSign that anyone could have scribbled on and sent over. Actually, it's going to be provably come from me. There's going to be communications tools because right now, we have fantastic end-to-end encrypted tools that are still managed by third parties. So if WhatsApp switches me off,
you're switched off.
I don't know what I do. Exactly, I'm switched off. So if email switches me off, I just go and find another email provider.
Mm-hmm.
So these new digital tools are going to allow me to have communications as well. Now I'm getting a bit further into the future. It's possible today. It's just not, scalable and production grade kind of yet. I don't think it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
But this new stack is emerging. That's what I meant by, I think the whole category is empowerment technology, in the same way that ed tech and health tech and reg tech. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Okay.
But I'm saying there's different layers and different technologies, and they're distinguished because they sit on my side. Right? The business model isn't trying to cross-sell or upsell or to make a recommendation as long as it's one that made the, paid the highest to make the top of the ranking.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on your point about personalization, you're exactly correct because one of my favorite sayings is, the only 360-degree view of the customer is the customer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? By definition, a business can't see. On average, you have 150. I've mapped these out. I've gone to great lengths over 15 years. You've got on average 150 relationships with businesses.
Uh-huh.
Now, whether they're relationships or not could be argued, but connections, all your previous employers, every educational establishment you've been to, the plumber, the loyalty companies that you're signed up to, all that stuff. That's on average. As a household, you've got another 40. So you've now got like knocking on for 200 relationships, all of whom have an email address or a phone number, with this clumsy, no wonder we have this massive headache managing passwords and managing which account number and where. Like it's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And so personalization is only as good as the profile that each of those companies had about me.
Sure.
But if you stitch them together as me, I can say, I'm interested in a car, I'm not interested in a car. So not only can they get better signaling, but they can personalize, because I can say, I'm interested in a car, but I'm only interested for this window, and it's going to be, roughly this kind of specification. Now I'm getting to the Doc Searls VRM end of things.
Yeah.
But it really gives us new ways. If you connect this customer stack thing to programmatic advertising,
mm-hmm.
which right now is a bit spammy and a bit, as you say, kind of scattergun, and is based on profiles that are made up and not consented and all the rest of it. If you give advertisers a clean, authenticated, real human being to show advertisements to, they actually become offers probably rather than ads.
Mm-hmm.
And I can turn them on and off and can control much more sensibly, the things I'm interested in or not. I think that's going to be really interesting and start to get us towards real hyper personalization, but on my set, done by me and for me.
Yeah, because right now it feels like you've got these individual kind of brands that try and do it, and it's just like everybody wants you to kind of be on their app because that's the way that they do it, because that's how they kind of like fuse you together. But then it's been like an explosion of apps and channels and everything. It's like going, I don't want another app, because then it's like going, that's another login and another password and totally. A bit like.
I mean, my favorite example of this is travel,
right?
Because think of a short trip you've been on, maybe a weekend away on, you've flown somewhere. I've got an app to get to the airport, which is maybe a taxi app or an Uber or something. Yeah. I've got an app for the airport. I've got an app for the airline, which is really kind of, they're trying to do loyalty and stuff, but in mobile check-in and so on. I might even have an app, depending where I've gone, for the COVID entry requirement.
Right.
And a visa. I've got an app on the other side. Maybe it's the taxi collecting me. Maybe it's the hotel who's giving me a key card. Maybe it's an event I'm going to, and I've now, they're ticketless, and I've now got a QR code. Like, I've now got 7 apps. Now, there's 2 answers to that. Either we build a super app, right? We build a like those in Asia, which are fantastically seamless and widely used, and they're brilliant.
Like the WeChat type of thing, where everything's kind of like in the one domain.
And Gojek, another, yeah. And they are, but very vertically integrated. So you can do anything you want to them as long as it's already been pre-approved by the provider. And of course, they can also switch you off whenever they want. So they're brilliant from an experience point of view. They're printing money because the cross-sell, upsell opportunities are massive. But my point is, in travel, we can build a super app for travel. So let's say Expedia does that, but they've got to connect to every possible taxi company, every possible hotel, like, it gets really big. Why don't you the other option is just give it to me. Back to some empowerment tech. Give me the digital tool to connect the services I want around me.
Yeah.
And that could include, by the way, and this is the punchline. Well, what if the flight's delayed while I'm in the sky, or I'm not going to make my connection? Right now, with this weird spaghetti of API calls to try and automate the next booking and make sure I'm not. Well, why don't you just give it to me? Because I can let the taxi know that I'm not going to be there. I can. My agent acting for me can bounce the hotel reservation I've got, or say I'm going to be there at 10 p.m., not 2 p.m., which is great for them, for the hotel, because they can release the rooms in different order. Right now, they're waiting for me, who thinking I'm going to show up. So the value, the opportunity is not just about empowerment and privacy and security. Those things matter. But I think this is going to create just tons of value for businesses who are going to be more efficient, better customer service. There's new revenue streams. And all of that can happen while I'm in the sky. And because it's an agent acting for me. Now, if we'd had this chat 5 years ago, I'd say, this is coming. We don't have the tech yet. It's not mature.
Well, it goes back to what I kind of said right at the beginning, because when I ended up speaking to Geraldine McBride at MyWave, that's sort of what Geraldine was trying to do back in there about it was, and I was like, wow, that sounds super cool. And it went, and I think that's probably, I mean, why was that? Is that because it was just like the tech wasn't quite ready, or what?
I think, do you know what? The headline is, I think it was too early.
Right.
And actually, all that work I was doing on business models and so on, like I said a while ago, it was trying to answer the question: what happens when customers have the data, or citizens have copies of their data? What's the commercial model? It was good as to work through. Well, how will it work? But we didn't know what the solution would be.
Right.
And those early, MyWave as an example in 2014, 15. I was tracking hundreds of kind of data stores, lockers, vaults, and they'd all have their own API to be able to move, and that means every bank has to connect to every different API of all the different providers. It got really messy. And I think there was the value proposition hadn't been worked through. I think the technology wasn't mature enough yet. And it was still a niche sport. It was still very narrow, and businesses couldn't see it yet.
Right.
And they were also very excited about social and big data and all the other things happening at the same time.
There's too many other kind of like dancing kind of elephants in the room at the kind of time.
Now we've tipped over. I think there's a bit of a perfect storm brewing. I think the tech is now available. We've got digital wallets, not just for funky, weird NFTs and tokens and some random coin. We can use the technology, get rid of all the weird fraudulent stuff and make it, well, no, I can now cryptographically sign a driving license and have it stored in my phone or in my cloud wallet. That is a complete game changer. And actually, that is the premise on which the European Union is about to mandate 27 countries and 300 million people will be offered a digital wallet by government using that same kind of technology. So it's now ready. The technology is ready, one. Two, consumer opinion has shifted so much that, there was a Cambridge Analytica 2015-16 kind of moment. Yeah. GDPR kicked in. California's now got CCPA. India's now got its data protection regulation. Brazil's really aggressive on this stuff. The zeitgeist has moved, saying it's not just about privacy ranting and surveillance. It's actually saying, no, we're going to have data portability by law. And what's not happened yet is okay, what does that mean? And what do we do with the data? We can now make it portable. Great. What happens next?
Yeah.
So that's happening. Plus, business models are shifting.
Right.
Everything's getting eaten by cloud, AI, subscription services. And then I think there's the business, the consumer opinions have shifted, the regulation. They're all coming together in this perfect storm. And I think over the next 24 months, we're going to see a real shift to this, the data organized around the individual with their own AI, with the tooling, the digital wallet inside their phone and so on. And so I think 2014 was too early. I think the next 2 to 3 years is going to get to scale, and which is why I think businesses need to start now. That's why I'm really bullish on there being an opportunity to help businesses make sense of this.
I mean, so I get it. I mean, I think but it feels like a real shift in control.
Yeah.
And some businesses are going to go, and like going, because it's like, because that's going to require them to do different things. I mean, so I guess there's two sides of it. There's how do you think businesses and organizations are going to respond to this? Because I think there's some people that are going to be off into the races and all just kind of go like, yeah, we can do this. And I can imagine that it might be led by particularly some of the phone companies, because they've already got the kind of the device in hand, and they'll see it as being, more functionality, keep people kind of like for longer loyal to the kind of to the hardware and stuff. But then there's implications around organizations and brands that want to do business with us. I mean, I'm sure you probably kind of developed a bit of a spectrum of here's how different people are going to respond. How do you think, what sort of reaction do you think organizations can have? And also, is there a tipping point? And then also the flip side of that, from a consumer perspective, I might like it because it's like, it's kind of slightly nerdy sort of like stuff. But I'm like going, if I think about Joe and Jane on the street, I mean, do they care?
Exactly. I think there's a good thing, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes is the trite way. I think browsers are a good proxy for thinking about how it might play out.
Okay.
So if you think you're a bank and you've got branches and you're trying to optimize for customer service and, product sales and so on, and then browsers arrive and everyone says, well, you've got to have an online offering, haven't you? You're going to have online bank. And they'll say, well, is it secure? How do I know it's Jamie showing up?
Right.
So very quickly get to a question of identity, fraud, security, scalability. And it was, in the 90s, browsers arrived and people were using them for chat rooms, and e-commerce was just early, but banking was like, well, we'll watch. And actually, a lot of the banks said, well, okay, this is those who are ahead of the curve said, well, we'll want our own browser. Of course we will. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a similar thing going to happen here. People are going to say, oh, well, customers are going to have their own digital tools. Well, those brands that understand identity a bit better are going to be well placed to help. Well, how do I, we're going to ask the same questions. Is it safe? Does it scale? How do I know it's really Jamie using the phone? How do I know it's really Jamie's wallet? All those things. But look what happened to banks. They had to run a new online banking operation as well as the old stuff. And this gets to your point about tipping point. I saw this morning, is it Barclays? They've just in the UK just had, they're shutting down some more branches. There's a whole, it's taken 25 years since online appeared as a tool for customers to do banking in a new way. So, as digital has arrived, the physical's gone down, and for them, it's about economics. For them, it's about customer experience and automation. I want to be able to bank from my sofa. Fine. I think we're going to see a similar thing with digital wallets. And your point of there'll be some businesses who understand digital more intuitively, especially the more, like in banking, it'd be the neobanks. I think we'll get it faster, rather than those with the branches and the massive balance sheets because they've been around 150 years. So those that understand digital, those that understand identity, those that are innovating fastest. So I think it's going to be like the arrival of browsers, but on warp speed. I think it's going to happen in 3 years.
Okay.
Because it's going to be much more efficient. I mean, how do you think about, the adoption of new technology from, you kind of think about customer experience and customer engagement in a really deep way. What's your thought on how this might be adopted or how businesses?
So I do think there's I'm sort of slightly conflicted about it. I can see the real benefit from a consumer perspective. And the idea that you can consolidate things and control things and push things out, and that's going to, that's brilliant. I wonder how that's going to get precipitated. If you like, kind of that demand is going to get sort of encouraged and nurtured. And I think the ideal people are the phone companies, because they're almost the platform to basically say, well, you've got your banking on there, you've got this, got that, the other, but actually you should be trying bringing this together. And this is a thing that sits on this, but separate from this. But it's like, and I think, to be fair, I think some people like Apple have already started to do that with some of their advertising and privacy controls and everything else. And so they've almost ventured into that space. They had that, remember that big advertising sort of campaign where they were pushing out. And so I think they're tiptoeing into that. And I think that's really interesting. I think, but on the business side of things, I think you're absolutely right. I think about some of the technological challenges and the data architecture challenges and the cultural and organizational challenges that many of these big organizations have got. And I'm a bit like, and you think about all the new stuff that's come on. I'll give you a simple statistic, this is one of my favorite ones from the last 12, 18 months. And so Deloitte produced this biannual global survey of contact center leaders from around the world. They released it, I think it was in April last year. And they asked them all, So how many of you have achieved an integrated omni-channel experience? Was it 11%?
Wow.
Or actually, I think I'm getting that wrong. It might be less than that. I think it might be about 7%. Now, when did we start talking about an integrated omni-channel experience? I mean, that's like, what, 10, maybe 15 years ago?
Plus, yeah.
Right? And so despite the fact that we know that it's something that customers want, we know that it's kind of like it impedes the service that we deliver to kind of people when we have to interact with them in the real time. We know that it impedes our understanding of what customers want and need and prioritize and value and all these different things. I'm a bit like, oh, so I'm hopeful, but I'm not optimistic in terms of the pace. I think there'll be some people that'll pick up and run with it because they've got the technology and the data architecture and the culture and everything else that can facilitate that and to be ready for it. I think all of the fuel or all the pieces are there for it to combust. But a long-winded way, I've got like a little story. I went to this conference a while ago. Somebody asked me, I had a bit of a nightmare getting there. I was in Barcelona. I was supposed to get there for about 10:30. Plane was delayed, broken down, some of the whatever. I ended up getting there at 4:30 in the morning to do a talk at 9:00 in the morning. And then they loaded on a follow-on panel after that done the talk. And then right at the beginning of the panel, they asked me, like, Adrian, so we want to come to you first and ask you about what do you think that we're going to be in 5 years' time? I had no idea what this question was going to be. It got completely sprung on me. And then in my sleep-addled mind, which is caffeine fueled and adrenaline fueled and things, after just doing this talk, I was like, what? And then something just kind of popped in my head. I said, you know what? I think in 5 years' time, we'll be excited about the opportunity that the future kind of promises, the promises of the future, the possibilities rather, but we'll be frustrated at the progress that we've made. And I said that a number of years ago, and I still think that's probably going to be the same thing again. It's like, I think that there's a lot of stuff, but I think we have to be real about how fast some of the stuff is going to do based on actually what's our current reality.
I think exactly right. And I think it's interesting you point about telcos, and I'd put banks in the same box.
Yeah.
Because some of this is about distribution.
No, exactly. I mean, I see the number of people that are paying for things on their phones these days.
Yes.
And it's like, I thought in my nerdy sort of like way of thinking about security, I'm thinking that just feels too consolidated to be secure. And so having something on your phone and then being able to pay for everything's on your phone.
I put up a post last week about this. I think if distribution is one of the barriers to overcome, then Apple and Microsoft, I mean, you could argue Google, and we'll talk about them in a second, but Apple and Microsoft, Apple has Apple has a distribution from a consumer point of view and controls the experience. They've also, by the way, you said they're kind of tiptoeing. I think they're being very deliberate at just doing it slowly, and they will wait and they will announce. And I think it will be in X years' time, but they've got identity, they've got the wallet, they've got consumer base, they've got the end-to-end experiences, they've got the merchant and retailer environment.
And they're building the history with it as well.
Well, they just bought a credit scoring company, and they're a bank in all but name. Right. So anyway, they've got the pieces. Microsoft's really interesting because they've got employees data. They've got Active Directory, they've got all the cloud instances, they've got Azure. They also own LinkedIn, and they've been working on a digital wallet for 4 or 5 years, longer. They've been working on identity for a long time, but there's a lot of the expertise is coming out of Microsoft. And so put those things together, I've got an employee identity. Data isn't inside companies. It's inside the company's providers. Right? It's instance. It's in the data lake. It's in the systems of record that are run by others. So I suppose where I'm going is, I think if somebody cracks a couple of use cases, and I've got some views on what those might be, I think it's not going to happen in health. Portable health data. Governments are going to be slow. Telcos, because they're so heavily regulated, should be more prime than they are. I think some of them might get it. Some telcos in the US making good moves, a couple in the UK, France, Australia. Some of the enlightened telcos are, but there's just so much other stuff going on, replatforming, regulation. Culturally, I talked about, yes, they might know a bit about identity, but are they digitally native?
Mm-hmm.
They pivot in the way they need to. I think the Apples and the Microsofts, they've got distribution. They've leaned into digital way faster, way more ably. I think some of those providers are going to be the ones to watch. And then there's about to be this kind of explosion of over-the-top providers. Right? Mm-hmm. Telcos have been eaten alive by the MVNOs, the operators that sit on top, but also the services that kind of sit on top of those. The apps and services like the WhatsApps of the world,
sure.
The traffic, right? So I think digital wallets and some of the empowerment tech, the personal AI, that's going to sit on top of the telcos and the banks. And I think that's where there's a danger for them. But I think you're right. I think we'll be frustrated by the amount of progress we've made in a few years, but excited about where it's going. I think a couple of use cases might spin up quite quickly.
So tell me about those use cases, and because that's the thing I was going to say. What this is, you go like, it's all very, that sounds interesting and great, but like actually, how does it all kind of like?
Yeah.
What's real going to look like? Kind of like what's in the near future? What's kind of engagement going to look like? What are these use cases going to look like? Because then it sort of starts to make us think. Gives us something to really think about.
I think there's two classes or two areas. One is making something that is horribly painful right now and needs to be fixed.
Okay.
Solving a big enough pain point. Another is doing something new that we couldn't do before.
Mm-hmm.
In the way that social media was a new category in its own right. I think solving a pain point, I think travel is a good one. Mm-hmm. And actually, let me see something different or something as well. This is going to really be helpful for people, normal people, where things are very, very fragmented already.
Mm.
If there's an experience like, I don't know, maybe even, payments or, where there's a few small players who can make a big difference, then they can kind of fudge it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need to move as quickly because individuals, there's only 3-4 things you need to do inside a couple of areas. I don't know, payments and employee, for example.
Yeah.
A couple of big HR systems can kind of fudge it and make it look okay. But where things are genuinely fragmented, that travel trip I just talked about, having 7 months, I think if players can come in and say, or a vendor comes in with a digital wallet, let's say, or a store of all the things about me, and I can make them available, I think I can make them available to businesses. I think travel is going to be one of the areas this will happen first.
Yeah.
Because I'll be able to have premium experiences. I'll be able to be sent, better offers, better ways of messaging with providers.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than having to be sent just another email or an SMS that's gone wrong to the wrong phone. I think that's where there's a real opportunity to organize the trip around the individual. And I'm not saying it's going to happen within 6 months, but I think if you go and dig around the travel industry, they're very excited about this potential. And there's some really big players building digital wallets,
right,
for this reason. So the big online travel agents, the big airlines, the providers who run booking systems, the people who are kind of the services layer below the brands you see, they're building this. They're building it. So that's going to happen. But the second area is, I think, loyalty and rewards.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. I was thinking about going, oh my God, it's like, when you think about, I don't have them. I don't have one, but like a Tesco Club card that's been around for such a long time.
Yeah.
And you just go, they've got all the kind of like, it feels like the natural sort of an extension of that. Just go like, we're just going to open this up.
Well, exactly. And what does opening up mean? The old world was, I have a walled garden and I can earn and burn inside my walled garden, and I buy 27 things and I get one free. I think if you start to give data back to the individual and you make it portable and verifiable and I can have an identity and so on, then I can prove things about myself anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I could say, yes, I am an employee of this company and I've spent ABC, I'm entitled to 20% off today. Those experiences aren't possible today because we can't move the data around.
Mm-hmm.
So an example is I got an email from British Airways saying, oh, good news, we've done this deal with Uber. And, there's an Avios kind of points thing going on. That will have taken them 2 years at least. Technical integration, commercials. I think about, well, who's got the regulation, like who's got the data, what's the data flowing, and how, like that is a big complicated problem. In this empowerment techie world, I can show up to Cafe Nero and prove that I flew British Airways today instantly.
Yeah.
And they can go on the day, decide, if you flew BA today, we'll give you a free cappuccino, whatever they've decided.
But also even that in that kind of travel sort of like kind of thing, it's like, if somebody goes, oh, your plane's delayed, go get a cup of coffee on us. Well, and we push it out and it's kind of done because you've got.
Do you know how it works today? You get given bits of paper.
Yeah.
Turn your way at the gate and say, sorry, your flight's been cancelled, whatever. They give you a bit of paper. You then have to go and show up at a hotel with a bit of paper, and it's mental. And I'm saying in this new loyalty experience way, I can prove anything about myself and I can do it privately. You don't need to know who I am. Mm-hmm. You just need to know that I'm entitled to ABC.
Mm-hmm.
I can give you, I can scan a QR code. It can just show a green tick that says entitled to a free upgrade today.
Yeah.
Think about you've been at the hotel and you're filling out forms and, have you stayed with us before, sir? I was here 3 weeks ago. You have no idea. It's crazy. And so I think loyalty, rewards, improved customer experiences, where it's going to happen sooner, partly because of data portability via me, but partly I think the experiences are so painful that it's going to be worth, 1, 2, 3, 5% of businesses wanting to implement it in a way. And I think we're now, I said, the perfect storm. Businesses have enough pain points. There's enough. The business models are being disrupted. New techs showing up all over the places, including Gen AI. Consumers are fed up with data breaches every 8 seconds. Plus, I've now got tech that means I can do things easily. So there needs to be a couple of service providers who run the booking systems, who run the tablet app on the desk, for them to say, well, we can just now accept proof of whatever.
Yeah.
Proof of I flew today, or I was here 3 weeks ago, or they can start to ask the data. Now there's devils in details because there's a lot that needs to make that happen. But this is where I think the things will happen first.
Wow. It's cool. I think it's like watch this space, I guess. It's something to think about. It's very much kind of head scratching kind of thing. But I should say, this is a shameless plug for Jamie's newsletter, because it'll keep you abreast of all this sort of stuff. Go look up Customer Futures newsletter. Look up Jamie on LinkedIn. I'll put all the links and stuff in the highlights that I put together, because that'll keep you abreast of all this sort of stuff. But this is like your intro to what's coming next, this new kind of like wave. But Jamie, anything else that you want to highlight before I ask you some sort of wrap up sort of questions?
No, I mean, it's been a really great conversation. I really appreciate it. I think, the pieces are now in place for it to happen soon. It's not there yet, but I think it will, with the right use cases in the right companies who are leaning into digital, leaning into identity, leaning into digital wallets. I think this will create a lot of value quickly.
Yeah.
And I think it's, as you say, it's watch the space, but pay attention to how an empowered customer could change customer experiences, I think, quite significantly. And that's going to be cheaper, better, faster, more privacy preserving, more secure, those things. So
it just made me think about something. Actually, I think there's probably an opportunity for some of these MarTech platform players that are heavily into the sort of personalization space. And because they're working across a whole bunch of brands, but the proposition is around engagement and personalization, for them to think about actually is there a platform extension that reaches out to the customers that you work with multiple brands that you end up doing it that way? And then if you can get their tech and the consumer tech to like talk to each other in a meaningful way, then there's possibly a pitch, an opportunity for them as well. And that was just a bit of a left field thinking about it, going, because you talked about providers in the background. But if we're talking about that personalization and engagement and all these different things, well, the people that are trying to make that better, that makes sense.
Completely. It's going to, a lot of this is going to be driven through by the providers to brands, CRM companies and the customer engagement platforms and the customer communication platforms, those who are sending out all those messages, because a lot of that is interruptive and difficult for consumers. And actually, if I've got a better digital tool on my side, well, why don't they message that instead? And I can be much more, it'll create a better experience for the customer overall, I think.
Well, it's also less wasteful as well, and it's that less kind of like spray and pray type of stuff. But anyway, I'll put all those links in the write up. But just a few quick fire questions before we finish up, Jamie. So I always like to get people to boil things down and ask them to what would be their best advice to people that want to improve their customer or employee experience. So what I've been doing is asking people to complete the sentence. And the sentence is, if you want to improve your customer employee experience, Jamie Smith says, do this, ... Complete that sentence. How would you complete the sentence, Jamie?
Start experimenting with empowerment tech digital tools like digital wallets and personal AI now, because it's going to take, 6, 12, 18 months to land on the right model and to implement it. So start now, because it's going to disrupt everything, I think.
Cool. There you go. So second question is, and this is more of a punk kind of question, because how could I not? What company or brand do you think takes a more punk approach to customer experience, or is this experienced leader? And why?
I'm going to cheat, give you two answers. I think one is, Monzo Bank in the UK.
Okay.
They've reimagined what it means to have a mobile, not a mobile first, but mobile only bank experience. So they get out the way when you don't need to be doing things, and they show up when you do want to be doing things. I think they've got a really great UI UX, and actually they're one of the banking leaders in the UK at the moment for that reason. I think they're really disruptive. And the second is Stripe.
Okay.
The reason I say Stripe is they're really thoughtful about how easy it is to implement. And so they quietly orchestrate a customer journey in the background for the payment step, but without you noticing. They remove every possible step where it's getting in the way. And they have this mini product called Link that isn't really widely talked about. I think they might have rebranded it recently. But it means that if you pay once with a Stripe provider or a merchant that takes Stripe, if you go anywhere else and have a merchant that pays Stripe, as soon as you put your phone number in, it goes, oh, we've already got your details. We can remember it from last time, and it's instant checkout. So I think from a checkout experience point of view, Stripe are quietly beavering away behind the scenes, and I think they're doing something pretty disruptive because of it.
Nice. Thank you. Two great names there. So final question before we wrap up. And this is something I've been doing recently because it all feels a bit doom and gloom right now. And I find myself consistently kind of doom scrolling in the morning over my first cup of coffee. And so I've been asking people on the podcast to help me end on a good news story. So I've been asking people, give me a good news story. Tell me what's the most interesting, positive, or exciting thing that you've seen in the last week.
In the last week, I am most excited by a little app called Kin, K-I-N. And I think they're doing something really disruptive and interesting. They're doing an AI, but it's on my side. So this is in the empowerment tech land. Mm-hmm. But why am I excited by it? You know the use case they're starting with? It's not loyalty. It's not payments. It's not ticketing. It's not KYC. It's wellness, mental health.
Okay.
In AI to help me get through the days, and it's completely private. And if you think about OpenAI and some of those bigger platforms, am I really going to share my deepest concerns, data, in the feelings with some of those big platforms? Probably not. And they're positioning themselves to say, well, look, no, this is a completely private, personal space for you to talk and get help when you need it and prepare for a presentation or get ready for a promotion or just, have an assistant that's working for you and it's completely private and the data's not going anywhere else. I'm really excited by that. And, mental health is a huge epidemic everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're going to need tools like this to, there's only so many trained assistants in the world who can actually help me. I think having a private AI that helps me with some of those tools, that gives me a good feeling, and I'm really excited about what they're going to do in the future.
Fantastic. What a good news. What a great story. Thank you for that. But so, Jamie, that's all I have for today. I just want to say, fantastic talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your insight and your expertise with us. All the very best with Mission and kind of how you're going to, what you're going to be doing over there. I will kind of make sure I get all this linked up and point people to both the newsletter, but also kind of Mission and all these different sort of things. Thank you. That's been great.
Well, thank you so much for having me. What a brilliant conversation. And I love the way you think about really starting with the customer and the customer experience. So it's really great to have the conversation. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Speak soon.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. And do tune in again. Thanks very much.